How is everyone doing? Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much to the Montreal Vegan Festival organizers for having me here. It's an honor. Thank you guys for coming to my demo today. My fourth cookbook will be out next year, and I'll be back in Montreal to promote that, and hopefully for Veg Fest next year. And I'm actually doing work in Sweden right now as well. I'm working to veganize an entire hotel in Stockholm, Sweden. I fly back there tomorrow. And then make sure to check out Mythology in Toronto whenever you guys are there. We do a vegan brunch. I have a vegan egg that I've created, and lots more. I'm looking to take over the vegan world. So today we're going to do a couple things. We're going to do a couple of my favorite recipes personally. I'm going to try and give you guys as much information as I can while I'm working. So we're going to do a scrambled tofu. And scrambled tofu may seem old, but I want to give a few tricks here. I go to a lot of vegan brunch restaurants all over the world, and I would say half the time it's not very good. So I'm going to give you a few tricks here. So one of the things I like to do, I like to start with a base of vegetables, and I like to put some caramelization on those vegetables. So here we're going to do a trio of mushrooms, peppers, and onions. So with the pepper, I'm going to show you guys my trick here. You take a little bit off the top, a little bit off the bottom. Anyone that uses this, I get 5%. Do you understand? 5% royalty fee for this trick. So a little bit off the top, a little bit off the bottom. And then you want to cut down the side just like that. Okay, so what you're doing is you're opening it up so you can essentially butterfly the pepper. And you just run your knife right along the wall here of the pepper. And you remove the guts, okay? And you're left with this. It's essentially a fillet. If you want to take it a step further, I don't know if anyone remembers Chef Tony infomercials. It used to be 3, yeah, you can fillet the fillet. So you could actually take it and fillet this again. The cell membrane here has a lot of water in it. There's no flavor. So it's great to remove that. For intricate garnishes, I'll remove that, and I'll do like a pepper slaw, and all the flavor is there. But I'm going to cut these guys actually into large pieces. You could really use any vegetables here for this base of the scrambled tofu that you want. I personally love peppers, high in vitamin C, so it helps you absorb the iron. Mushrooms, great for umami. Whatever mushrooms you want to use, chanterelle, shiitake. Here we just have basic button mushrooms. You could throw portobello mushrooms in here. And yes, I can cut without looking. So we're going to get the mushrooms going. I don't like to cut the mushrooms too small because mushrooms really go down in size. So, you know, you start them fairly thick. They're going to go to a quarter of that. Onion, you have the root end, north and south. So what you want to do when you're dicing an onion is remove a little bit off the top, a little bit off the bottom. We're going to cut right through the root end here. You want to keep that root end intact. That's right here. So you're going to peel off the outside. There's many layers to an onion, just like there are many layers to a chef. You can talk to my wife about that. So we're going to dice the onion. You want to keep that root end intact, okay? That's what's going to hold that onion together. So you're going to go right down the side here. And thank you, Montreal, for having nice, sharp knives. You don't know how many times I've done this where we have really bad knives. The finer the dice of the onion, the more times you're going to go through the next way. So we're going to do a fairly fine dice, so we're going to go 3 or 4 times through the other way. Good food isn't just about flavor, it's about good texture. So we want to have uniform pieces of onion here for our scrambled tofu. We don't want big chunks. The other reason is they're not going to cook at the same rate. If you have a really small piece of vegetable and a really large piece of vegetable, obviously the really small piece of vegetable is going to overcook or burn by the time the other one is ready and soft. So getting a little bit of grapeseed oil here in my pan. I'm going to bring the pan over to the board. And I'm going to slide my veggies right into the pan. And you actually want to hear that, right? You never want a pan waiting for you. Sorry, you never want to wait for the pan to get hot. And you never want to put food into a cold pan. It's going to absorb oil. And it's just not good cooking at all. Okay, so we have our vegetables in here. I'm actually going to turn the heat up a little bit because I like to turn the heat up a little bit. Wah, 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 wah. So we're going to start this getting going. The temperature is going to increase in the pan. The next thing we're going to be working on here is, and I'm putting more oil because this is meant to feed everyone for portions, so don't get scared and say, oh my God, he's adding so much oil. This is literally so everyone can try the scrambled tofu. While this is starting to caramelize, we have tempeh here. I'm going to show you guys a quick tempeh bacon. So Tempeh is one of my favorite things to use. It's Indonesian in heritage. It is not popular yet, and a lot of people don't care for it because it's fermented beans. Fermented beans, when you don't do anything to them, smell like fermented beans. They're gross. I remember when I first went vegan, I ran out and I grabbed tempeh and I started eating it frozen thinking I was saving the world, and it was just disgusting. And I said, if this is what vegan food is like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. The thing is, tempeh is fantastic if you manipulate the texture and the flavor. So I always like to add a little bit of steam or moist heat to it at the beginning. My favorite way is to boil it. And then for a basic way of doing it is just by using water and wheat-free tamari or soy sauce. And you just sort of penetrate the center with flavor. By steaming it, you're softening up the pores in the tempeh as well, and you're making it able to accept a marinade. Fantastic texture. Tempeh loves to be fried, baked, minced. You can use it in a lot of different applications. So here we're going to use tempeh bacon. I should add, too, that I'm very particular with my tempeh. I've been supporting and using a brand called Noble Bean for 15 years now. And they're actually based out of Quebec, out of Montreal. They're the same owners as Au Vive, the really well-known vegan restaurant here. So shout out to Noble Bean. I love them. Not just because they're local, but the texture of this tempeh is the best. It's unpasteurized tempeh. And if you're working with tempeh, you want to try and get unpasteurized if you can. Best texture, hands down. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to slice this nice and thin. I've already steamed this one ahead of time and let it cool down. Okay, we're going to slice it nice and thin. If you're lucky enough to have a deli slicer at home, which I know most of you don't, a really sharp knife will work. In the restaurants, we use a deli slicer, and we slice it really, really thin, just, really, really paper thin. Just coming back to my veggies here. I'm going to get my next pan on. So with the tempeh now, we need to apply some flavor, okay? We have our steamed tempeh. I'm going to put it into my container here. And what we're making here is tempeh bacon. Now, bacon, for those of you that don't know, is the pig's stomach. It's disgusting. And it's salt, sugar, and smoke are added. Well, pig stomachs are full of fat, so that's how you get the fat flavor from bacon. So we need to replicate that. So here we're just going to use some oil. The smoke, we're going to use a little liquid smoke. If you're adventurous and you actually smoke things at home, you can smoke it yourself. Liquid smoke is just a bit of a cheater way of adding that flavor in. We're going to add some tamari, and we're going to add some agave or maple syrup. We are in La Belle Provence, so we should use maple syrup here. It would be bad to use Mexico agave in La Belle Provence. Ah! So we're going to get some water into the blender. I like to add water when I'm working with tamari because tamari is very salty. So I'm going to get some tamari in here. I find the water really cuts through that saltiness in your final dish after you've cooked it, because you want to remember, when you apply heat, you evaporate liquid, you concentrate flavors. You add something super salty at the beginning, at the end, there's a good chance it's going to be salty. This is actually something we learn in chef school. I remember the first week I was there, we were all in the kitchen, and we had beans in a pan, and we were flipping beans around, and there's beans flying everywhere in the kitchen, and it was, even 20 years ago when I did it, I remember that, so it's kind of funny. So we'll get some maple syrup in here. That's for the sugar component, the sweet component for the bacon. A little bit of liquid smoke. A little bit of this goes a long way. You really don't need a lot. And then the fat component for the bacon is some oil. This is grapeseed oil. You could use any oil you want. Well, I shouldn't say that. It should be a refined oil. You wouldn't want to add coconut oil here or olive oil. They're going to impart too much of a flavor. Whenever I'm recreating a recipe that is a traditional recipe, i.e. Bacon made from pigs, which is boo, pig bacon, you want to think back to the original flavor components and how they taste and bring that into the recipe you're doing. So if this was a Mediterranean-style recipe, I would use olive oil, but it's not. So I have my veggies cooking down here. They're starting to pick up nice caramelization, and by caramelization, I mean they're sort of browned a little bit. The natural sugars are starting to come out. There's two ways to do scrambled tofu, in my opinion. You can use a nice, firm tofu, okay? Or you use a medium firm water pack. And for the medium firm water pack, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to press it overnight. So you take the tofu, on a bowl, something that catches the water, put a towel or paper towel over, put another plate on top, and put a weight. And you press the water out, and what you're left with is a fantastic texture, very similar to scrambled eggs. For today, we're just going to do really firm tofu. It's what most people have and what most people are comfortable using at home. When I'm making scrambled tofu, I don't like making it all really fine. Again, it goes back to thinking about scrambled eggs. When you have scrambled eggs, I mean, I haven't for 15 or 16 years, but some of the pieces of eggs are a bit bigger. So when you're trying to replicate it, it's important. And texture. Texture is key. Texture is everything in food, not just in vegan food and traditional food. Texture is so important. So we have our veggies here. They're starting to caramelize nicely. So I'm going to get my tofu right into the pan. And the tofu is going to start to pick up some of the brown bits in the bottom of the pan as well. I'm going to add a little more oil. Again, remember, this is enough to feed 100 portions, so don't be scared. One of the things I will say is tofu does like oil. And when I say that, tofu and tempeh, they're very porous. They like fat. Fat is flavor. Fat makes people happy. It actually releases serotonin in the brain, and that's why we like potato chips and French fries. We eat it and we're like, oh yeah, this is really good. It's a flavor sensory thing. So I understand the whole whole food, no oil, low oil thing. I respect it as well. I'll actually be in Washington State in November with T. Colin Campbell and that whole crew of people. If any of you want to come to Washington State, it's called the Remedy event. It's a Skamania Lodge. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a 4-day event in the wilderness, and you learn from Jean-Pierre, who is the trainer for the Ellen DeGeneres, and T. Colin Campbell's going to be there, and a whole bunch of other, Ruby Roth, who wrote some vegan children's books. So yeah, so oil is tasty, in moderation, right? So we're going to get that mixed up. A couple things here, a little bit of turmeric. Turmeric is full of tannins, okay? Tannins are the same thing that's in red wine. It can literally make your tongue vibrate if you have too much. I've been to so many restaurants, again, all over the world, and I get scrambled tofu, and all I taste is turmeric. For this much tofu, which is a lot, you really need such a very small amount, especially since this is organic turmeric. And in food, you always want to remember you can always add, but you can't take away. So it's better to add a little bit now, and if you need to add a little bit after, that's what you do. This is ground cumin. I like ground cumin in my scrambled tofu. You definitely don't have to at all. But again, just a little bit goes a long way. And really, you could add anything you want. Curry, scrambled tofu, Japanese style. You could add miso, toasted sesame oil. You could do eggplant in here. You could caramelize the eggplant down and make a Japanese style. There's just so many ways to go with this. What's important with the turmeric is that it hits the oil, it hits the heat. That's going to start to release some of the natural oils in the spice. Whenever you're cooking with spices, you always want to make sure to apply heat to them, especially when you're making a curry or anything like that where there's a lot of spices. They need to hit that oil and be cooked out. Otherwise, they're gritty and they don't release their natural flavors. So we're going to let that cook for a minute. Back to my tempeh. Okay, so it's sliced. I have my marinade in the blender. And it's important for this recipe. And I should say that all of these recipes will be on the website for the Montreal organization next week. One of the recipes I also gave you guys, because it's brunch, you need butter, is it's a cultured cashew milk butter of mine. It's absolutely phenomenal. It works just like traditional dairy butter from cows. Boo. I have to do that. It's gross that we take cow milk and eat it to me. Sorry if I offend anyone in saying that. It blows my mind that we still do it. So my cashew milk butter is easy to make. It's delicious. It works for sautéing, spreading on toast, baking with. If any of you are familiar with Miyoko Skinner and the line of Miyoko's cheeses or whatnot, it's very similar to her butter in texture and flavor. So we're going to blend this up. I don't ever use Vitamix, so I think, there we go. It's important to blend this recipe. If you just whisk this together in a bowl, the oil will not emulsify. What's important here is the oil emulsifies. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the oil will stay on the top of the tempeh, and the tempeh won't absorb it. And again, what we're trying to do is recreate bacon from pigs, boo. And if you think about how they make bacon from pigs, one more time, boo. The oil's not on the top, right? The pig fat is throughout the whole flesh of the animal. So that's what we're trying to do here too. So this guy can marinate up to, I mean, I've had it marinating 5 or 6 days. It's good for an hour. It's really good to do overnight. You could do this a day in advance and just have it ready. I'm just going to come back to my tofu here. Again, what's important, especially since I'm making a bit larger of an amount of tofu, is that the turmeric gets cooked throughout. You don't want little clumps of that and your guests to eat it. Their tongue will vibrate. And we don't want to give vibrating tongues to the guests, correct? So with the tempeh here, the next step, because there is a lot of sugar in the tempeh, we don't want to take this and put it directly into a hot pan. What we want to do is almost dehydrate it in a way. We're going to take it, and we're going to lay it out on a baking sheet, and we're going to pop it in the oven. And what you want to do is start to concentrate the flavors of the marinade. And the oil, again, that's why it's important to emulsify this marinade ahead of time. The oil is going to start to penetrate the center of the tempeh. And like I said at the beginning of the demo, tempeh loves oil, right? It's very porous. It's a bean. It loves absorbing the fat. The sugars in the maple syrup or the agave, whatever you use, are going to start to concentrate, as is the salt and the umami in the wheat-free tamari. So we're going to take this and pop it in a preheated oven just for a few minutes. It won't take long. So this is cooking down nicely. I like to give my scrambled tofu a bit of texture. I feel like it's important just to put a bit of browning. Again, those natural sugars, even in the tofu, has a little bit of natural sugars. I like to start to brown that a little bit. So we're going to let that continue to cook. One of the things I love adding personally to my scrambled tofu is greens. I've been vegan a long time, 15, 16 years now, and I really have that belief that it's important to eat green vegetables. I mean, everyone should be, but especially as someone who's vegan, there's lots of good things in here, and it's really easy to incorporate them into your diet. So whenever I make scrambled tofu, whether it's kale or bok choy or spinach or broccoli, I always love adding a little bit in right towards the end. And I add it in right at the end to keep it nice and green. Okay, so the broccoli we're just trimming down. The stems you could save. Stems are awesome. I could do a whole cooking demo on broccoli stems. In France, they're actually they're a delicacy, and they will sous vide them. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that term. You can sous vide broccoli stems. They sous vide them in butter and garlic and thyme, and it's a real delicacy. So you could do lots of things with them. I've made broccoli stem slaws before. So we're just going to, again, stir the scrambled tofu. If you guys can see, sort of, it's starting to pick up a little bit of texture, which is great. That's what I'm looking for. I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. And then I have my other pan getting nice and hot. So what I'm going to do is get my oil. Again, you don't want to be waiting for the pan, right? You want the pan waiting for you. And you never add the oil ahead of time, especially in this day and age with social media and text messages and Instagram and all that kind of jazz, because you get a text, you get pulled away, all of a sudden your oil starts on fire. All oils have a smoke point. Smoke point is just another fancy way of saying this is when it catches on fire. Grapeseed oil, canola, vegetable oils have a really high smoke point. But things like olive oil, very low. Olive oil is 350, 400. Canola, grapeseed, etc. is like 800, 900 degrees. So they go really high. We're going to get our garlic right into the pan. For me, this is one of the only ways of cooking green vegetables. I love it. We got our garlic in the pan. We don't want to burn the garlic. Garlic burns very quickly. But at the same time, you want to get it into the hot oil and start to release some of those aromatic flavors, smells, etc. So we'll stir the broccoli around a little bit so it picks up some of the flavor. I actually didn't bring salt up on here on stage. Do you guys have salt back there? I mean, it's not a big deal if you don't. Here's where I add some salt. Salt draws out moisture. It seasons food. I forgot the salt. I'm so sorry. So we have our broccoli in here. Ah, beautiful. Merci beaucoup. And that's where you guys say de rien, correct? Ah, I'm learning. I'm learning. See, in Ontario, we only have to take French until high school. Ugh. I can't open it, but this is where you would add some salt. Oh, a little bit came out. I think I cracked a hole. Because you want to keep seasoning everything, right? You want to make sure every time you add a layer, you're seasoning each layer. So our broccoli is in here. I'm going to get some spinach. Again, whatever greens you guys want to use. Swiss chard, mustard greens I love. Whoops. In the restaurant, I would be cooking with white wine. But here I'm going to add a little bit of water. And you should hear that's what you're looking for. You want to start to create some steam here. You want to help the green vegetables cook. Just going to give it a stir, and that's going to prevent the garlic from burning as well. I'm just going to take a bowl, pop that right on top, and that'll just help create some steam for those to finish cooking. So we'll go back to our scrambled tofu here now. Okay, so a couple things here at the end. We're going to add a little bit of fresh thyme. I love fresh thyme. Fresh thyme and mushrooms are a really good combination. To strip fresh thyme, you hold it here at the top and just strip back and peel away the leaves. The top of fresh thyme is perfectly edible, so it's sort of like asparagus. It breaks away naturally. You always want to add fresh herbs. I mean, I say always. There's always a rule for exception. But in cooking, you always want to add fresh herbs towards the end of the cooking process. And nice sharp knife, and you don't want to bang the heck out of them. You're going to start to oxidize it, and they're going to start to turn brown and black, and the flavor is terrible. So just give a rough cut through the fresh thyme. You could add fresh oregano here. Rosemary, I probably wouldn't add to this flavor combination, but rosemary would suit other flavor combinations. So we'll get some fresh thyme in here. And then a couple things, my sort of secret ingredients, if you will, in vegan cuisine. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it now. But so this is wheat-free tamari. I talked about it earlier. Adds a great depth of flavor, umami. You could use soy sauce. The great thing about tamari is it's naturally gluten-free. And this guy here is called nutritional yeast. If anyone's not familiar with it, the slang term in the vegan world is nooch. In my restaurant in Toronto, my first one that I had a big bulk bin because I would go through 20 pounds a week of nutritional yeast. And in the kitchen, I had a big bin, and it was labeled nooch. Like we had beans, hemp seeds, sunflower seeds, and it said nooch. And I'd bring people in for a trial experiment to see if they could work at my place. And if they didn't know what nooch meant, oh, I don't know. So we call it nooch. Nooch is fantastic, or nutritional yeast is fantastic. It's actually it's a yeast that's grown on beet molasses most commonly, and then it's pasteurized, and then it's fortified. So this company, I get this question all the time when I do cooking demos. What's your favorite nutritional yeast? It's actually this one. It's called Abenakis, and they're actually from Quebec. Fantastic nutritional yeast. I actually spoke to the scientist in the laboratory several years ago because I had questions for him. And he was awesome. He answered all my questions. And they make tons of different types of nutritional yeast fortified with all sorts of different things for different applications in food processing or whatnot. But theirs I find to be the cheesiest. Red Star is good as well, but I definitely find theirs to be the cheesiest. And that's what, for me, I'm going for in good scrambled tofu. I am just going to taste this really quickly because I want to make sure you guys are getting an awesome sample. Yep. And then I'm going to add my green vegetables right in. I am going to stir this together. Give it a flip, 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 flip. How are you guys doing? Hungry? Well, that's my job, to feed you. I know I'm making a mess here. I am so sorry, but... So that's my scrambled tofu. I mean, to be honest, I'll even add more nooch at the end. I'm not scared with nutritional yeast at all. As you can see, it's just, as you start to add more, there's a bit of like a saturation level of it. And it starts to sort of, not congeal, but it builds up like a layer of like, basically like cheese. So I add a lot. If you wanted to add vegan cheese here, like a Dea or Gusta, I know is a big one here. You could add that here at the end. when adding vegan cheeses, I never like to add them too. I like to add them towards the end. They have starches in them and oils, and I find that if you cook them too much, the starches and the oils split, and you start to get something that's oily and a bit of a mess. So I don't know if you're familiar with monter au beurre, is a classic French terminology. It means add butter at the end to a sauce. It's almost like monter au beurre when you add vegan cheese. And you add it right at the end, and the heat, turn off the heat, and it just melts it right. So that's the best way, in my opinion, to add vegan cheese. And that little bit of liquid, because the extra firm tofu has less liquid in it, that little bit of liquid that comes out from the spinach and the broccoli just gives it a really nice texture right at the end. And my tempeh bacon is getting there. It would take another 15 or so minutes, so you can see a picture there. Gotta pose for the camera. So that's my tempeh bacon here. So what I would do is I would let it cool completely at this point, and then I would heat it in the pan with a little bit of oil, just a little bit, and not super high. And the reason not super high is because the marinade is higher in sugar, maple syrup or agave or whatnot, and you don't want to burn those sugars. So medium heat in the pan, non-stick is best if you have it, a little bit of oil, and you get it nice and crispy. The thinner you make it too, the crispier it's going to get. So that's why in the restaurant, we like to use the deli slicer. We shave it really, really super thin, and you get like a crunchy tempeh bacon. It's just awesome. Does anyone have any questions? Do you guys have a microphone for questions? Yeah? Does anyone have any questions? You can ask me anything. Anything? Nothing? Bueller? No questions. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Do you guys want to take this for?
I often use water when I scramble my tofu, just to use less oil. Are you against that in sort of for the taste or?
No.
Wait.
So every year I do at least 1 or 2 events with the not this one. There is a whole world of oil-free cooking, and I think it's fantastic. The thing about oil is, using oil, you will never get caramelization with water. You will not. It will cook, it will steam, but it's different properties. So what you're left with is less depth of flavor. I'm not against it at all. I've lost 25 pounds in the last 6-7 months myself, and I'm continuing to lose weight, so I am doing more of that. Really just depends on what you're looking for. If you've had a bottle of wine the night before and you wake up in the morning, maybe go with a little coconut oil. But if you're in the Wednesday morning and you're exercising or whatever, yeah, water works perfectly. Best thing to do, to be honest, is to have a squeeze bottle if you can at home, or something like this. So like this. So when you're cooking, because the water evaporates, so what you want to do is have that bottle next to you so nothing burns. And that's what I do at the cooking demos when I do the oil, salt, and sugar-free cooking demos. And I'll be in November, I'll be in Washington for the Remedy event, and that whole week event is oil, sugar, and salt-free, or very close to it. So I hope that answers your question.
If you want, we have another question over here.
Yeah, for sure.
I noticed you were using liquid smoke. Isn't that harmful? What are the ingredients?
So everything is harmful. That's my answer. Everything is harmful. It's about using things in moderation. Liquid smoke is distilled smoke. Distilled wood chips. So it really depends on what you're looking for in life and how you want to live your life. The clothing we're wearing is full of dyes. The shoes, the stage, the lighting, the air in here. So is it a health? Is it like sprouted chia seeds? No. But if you never want to have anything smoked in your life, I have no judgment whatsoever.
What about the as you call them, pepper guts? I saw it thrown them away. I think you can use the seeds. Aren't they comestible, the pepper seeds?
The seeds from the bell pepper? No, they're bitter. You could use the guts and stalk, or various ways, but the seeds are bitter. I would not use those from the bell pepper. Yeah. I'm just throwing it away now because I'm on stage and I'm not in my restaurants or when I run food service operation. No one throws anything away. They know that.
So just to continue on the question on the liquid smoke, so for somebody who can't find any or wouldn't want to use any, do you think there's anything that could be?
Smoked paprika. Smoked paprika works. You don't want to use too much because paprika is concentrated capsicum, and it comes through strong in the end result. I mean, you don't have to use it. It's just a depth of flavor, and it makes things taste really good. But yeah, you don't have to use it at all. Smoked paprika, anything smoked. Like I said, if you want to get adventurous and buy wood chips, it's not hard to smoke at home. Just make sure you have the windows open, and you can create a smoker in your kitchen. Does anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
One was over here.
Hi there.
Hi.
Was it for the marinade? Is it all right to use avocado oil?
For sure.
Okay.
Avocado oil is like a mid-range smoke point, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with using it. Don't quote me. I think it's 600 or 700 degrees. So avocado oil is fantastic, but not for high heat cooking because it smokes. When you heat something in a pan on high, the temperature of the pan itself will be 900 to 1100 Fahrenheit. So you want to keep that in mind. So that's why restaurants use canola oil or soybean oil or vegetable oil for deep frying, so it doesn't degrade. It's also cheap. But yeah, avocado oil for that would be great. Some avocado oils I've tasted have a really strong avocado flavor, so you want to, if that doesn't bother you, I mean, I have avocado tattooed on my arm. I love avocado. So yeah, for sure. But don't use like flax oil or anything that has a low smoke point and degrades with heat. Don't use that. Chia oil, flax oil, walnut oil, those things. Don't use that for that.
We have two more if you're,
for sure.
down for it. I think there was one over here.
Hi. Do you use Kalamalac salt when you are trying to?
Yeah. So that's it. So the question is, do you use Kalanamak, also called black salt? I do. And for this recipe, that would be fantastic. I just didn't change it. I'm not going to lie. So Kalanamak, for those of you guys who don't know, also called black salt, is salt that comes from volcanic ash in the region of the Himalayan mountains. It has sulfur in it, and because it has sulfur, it tastes like eggs. So it's fantastic to use when you're trying to replicate egg flavors. Absolutely, you could use that in this 100%. If any of you follow me on Instagram, or you will follow me on Instagram, you'll see I make a vegan egg with a runny yolk in Toronto and now in Sweden as well. And the base of that is Kalanamak. It's black salt. It's what gives it the eggy flavor. Anyone else?
One more here.
Yeah. For all the complexity of your knowledge, I have the most basic question. Could you run through what you told us never to do with oil in a hot pan?
When you're heating a pan, when you're cooking, you always want to preheat the pan. You never want to put food in a cold pan. That's bad cooking. Multiple reasons why. The main one is when you add the oil, it absorbs the oil, and it's soggy at the end. So you get the pan hot. When you're ready to cook, you add the oil right before you're ready to cook. That's the best way to do it. So she's saying that you're not supposed to heat an empty pan. That's not true in the restaurant business. I don't know where you read that, but in the restaurant business, you're Lagostina from 30 years ago. Well, Lagostina never worked in a restaurant because when the orders are coming in, we can't heat every pan. We heat 10 pans ahead of time. You have to have things ready. And I mean, I don't think that's good advice, period. When you're at home and you're cooking, it's best to, you do your whatever, you have a glass of wine or a glass of kombucha if you don't drink alcohol. You're letting it get, so when I was starting here, I had these on low because I didn't want to start them and then start talking. I wanted to make sure you guys were watching me, not waiting for a pan to heat up. And that's the same way at home. And what I'm saying is don't put the pan on, put the oil, and then go do this. And that's what I was saying is we all have smartwatches or iPhones, and we get distracted, and that's when that can catch on fire. So I'll give Lagostina. Does anyone else have any other questions or anything at all? So my 4th book will be out next year. with Penguin Random House. I will definitely be back here next fall, winter to help promote it. For those of you guys that come to Toronto, please come to Mythology. Message me on Instagram. Let me know when or if you can make it. I'm veganizing a hotel in Stockholm, Sweden right now called the Royal Park Radisson Blue Hotel. It's a huge hotel, beautiful facility. Within the next year, I think the whole thing will be vegan, including the bedding and the products and everything. And I have other projects I'm going to start to announce soon in other countries and continents as well. So follow along, and thank you again to you guys for having me here. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you.
I think before we play, we might have time for one more question
Yeah.
if somebody has, and then we'll do a little taste test.
Yeah.
And before things are handed out, because I know it smells amazing, for those who are sitting in the front, it smells absolutely amazing. No pushing, no shoving. Try to take one sample per person. And my personal opinion would be if you're all... Please don't call child services. My personal advice would be if you're already vegan, if you've had scrambled tofu, maybe let somebody who's a non-vegan get a little taste test and see what it's all about. That's my personal opinion. One last question.
Anyone?
I do have a suggestion for your next cookbook. I feel you should make a vegan sarrasin buckwheat or potato knish. Just because of your name, so it could be the McNish knish.
I have a phrase. Yeah. There's a well-known vegan in New York who always calls me that. Yeah, a knish. You know, I've never had one, but I'll. You grew up with knishes? I'm going to be in New York in a few weeks, so you know what? I'll go try and find a vegan knish, and I'll do that for you. Okay? What was your name? Yeah. Okay. I'll do the knish, and I'll find you, and I will courier you once you live in Montreal. I'll courier you a McNish knish. Everyone hear that? I'm going to send it to her. Okay? Hold me to my word. Anyone else? Thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate it.